Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stream and Hub Radio. I am Sage Stevens, the host of Shout Out with Sage. Today, my guest is a writer, producer, director. Aside from being a filmmaker, he is the chairperson of the University of Colorado, Denver Department of Film and Television. His current feature film, Publish or Perish, that has won over 20 awards on the film festival circuit, is a dark comedy that stems from his life as a professor. He is a Fulbright Scholar and won an Emmy for his documentary, Mortal Lessons. His previous feature film, A Feral World, is a coming-of-age post-apocalyptic tale, which is available internationally. And I want to welcome to the show today, David Liban. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Cool. So, I tried to get everything all in there for you.
Yeah, it sounds like you got it. A lot of it, yes.
Cool. So with your current film that occurred during the strike, or part of the strike anyways, how did that affect your production and or the release of the film?
So we actually shot the film in January 21. So at the time, the strike was not even a thing.
Right.
We were dealing with COVID at the time, and that was a different different thing to deal with. But as far as the release is concerned, that happened during the strike. And so what that meant was we needed to get a waiver if we wanted our actors to help promote it. So that was so we did get the waiver at the last minute. So we had a red carpet event, as you know.
Right.
And
which is where I met you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was and so our actors were able to attend and help promote the movie at that event.
So for those that aren't in film, what exactly is the waiver? Can you sort of explain that, like SAG and how all that works, the process?
Yeah. So when you are making a movie and you want to get actors who are in the union in SAG or SAG-AFTRA, you have to become a signatory, which is a process that you have to go through, and they approve you. And then there's all this paperwork. There's a lot of things you got to do to get approved by SAG.
A lot of bureaucracy.
Right? Oh my God, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's all for the benefit of the actors, so it's a good thing. But it's not easy for a small independent production to manage all that. But once we do, we're great. Now we have access. We can hire SAG actors, which are often some of the cream of the crop, that are out there. And so that was terrific. And so then as far as the waiver is concerned, since our production company is not associated with the AMPTP, or is it PTP, we could qualify for a waiver because we are not the people that are, taking advantage or not being fair to the actors or the writers.
Right. So did anyone, did you have to explain that to certain people, like when you were doing the premiere and stuff?
Primarily it was a fear largely that if we were to go forward and not have the waiver, would that look bad upon us for disregarding the rules of SAG? Because we want to keep making movies, and we don't want to, shoot ourselves in the foot by upsetting the one of the major, acting unions and have all those people refuse to work with us. So it was important to me to let people know that, we respect what the people are striking for, but we have a movie to release, so please help us.
Yeah, exactly. You're a very indie film. Where are you guys based out of?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Right. And most of your actors, and you shot in Colorado as well.
We shot in Colorado. We had two actors that were from LA. One of our antagonists was from LA, James Shanklin, and also Katie Michaels. She was an actress in the film as well. So she's in LA, but everyone else was here in Denver.
Right. So your movie, Publish and Perish, is a dark comedy. How did you know how dark to go? Like from the screenplay to when we see it, finished on screen, was that, because I have a very dark sense of humor, and I know some people are a little, taken aback from that. So how did you measure that?
So it's called Publish or Perish. And That's okay. And so how to know when it's, so actually we've had a lot of discussions about that. So what is dark comedy? Dark comedy is like when you get to a certain point, if you cross a line and you've gone too far, you lose your audience. So you have to kind of like, if you still had to empathize with our protagonist, right? You had and sympathize, right? And so if you got to a point where it was no longer funny and it was horrible, now we've entered horror and now we're not in comedy anymore. So there's one scene actually that we cut back because we did cross that line and it was you no longer liked our character. And so we cut that back, and that made now we had a really good laugh at that moment, where before it was like, oh my God, this guy's horrible. I can't even, root for him anymore. So, it's on the page from the get-go as far as like where that comedy lives, and the comedy is definitely, based around terrible things that happen, which is what dark comedy is, so that was kind of, where I was coming from.
Right. It's very, as I told you, I think when we were talking about it when I met you, very Coen brothers sort of, very dark, but very funny at the same time. I loved it. Definitely. Definitely my type of comedy. You were also an Emmy winner for a documentary. How do you go from documentary to feature film? Like, are they similar? Are they different?
They're very different. A documentary is a little bit easier at one level. I think it's harder in post-production, but you don't need a big crew. You can do it a little bit at a time. You can gather and then revisit the material and then cut it together. So it takes a lot longer in the shooting period. And some of the times you have to, you start down a path where you think you're telling this story, and then you talk to the lead, that your subject, and they say, they are the experts. And so they tell you something that kind of leads you down another way. So almost every documentary I've made, ended up someplace different from where I started, right? Where you have you're making a fiction film, you have a screenplay, you have a blueprint for where the film is going to go and what it's going to do and what you need to shoot and how many days you're going to shoot. So you can plan it out, but it's massive on the beginning, and it's a huge endeavor to get pre-production and get everybody on board and get the financing in place. Where a documentary, you could kind of go out and just do it and make a little bit and do it a little bit at a time. So that's kind of the main difference. But my shift from documentary to feature it's kind of like it's always been there. Like I made a lot of shorts, along the time I made documentaries as well. But, I've always wanted to make feature films. So that's kind of always been a goal in the back of my mind to do feature films.
What led you to writing this movie?
Okay. So I am a professor at University of Colorado, Denver. And so, I've written other screenplays, but this one in particular, it was that, I had gone through the process of tenure, and right. It's a wildly stressful thing for people that don't know academia. If you don't get tenure, you lose your job, right? So you've got a lot on the line. You've invested 7 years of your life in this institution, and you're trying to be a contributing member of the faculty. And then, if you don't get tenure, you lose your job, you're fired. And so there's a great deal of stress there if you have a family, if you have responsibilities. Right,
exactly.
And so so along those lines, I was thinking about worst case scenarios. And so I would think about these scenarios and kind of jot them down and just sort of like, what would happen if? How would I handle it? And in real life, I would handle it much different than the way my characters do. But at the same point, I thought it was a funny premise to kind of go from and playing out the worst, in what this character might actually do. So should I explain the premise to the movie?
Yeah, sure. Definitely go for it.
So the premise is about a professor who is going up for tenure, and on the day that he's delivering his materials, that very day, he accidentally runs over a student, and he doesn't want to let it impact his career. So he hides the fact, he hides the body, and then his life starts to spiral out of control. And while it's happening, he's got a very tenuous relationship with his boss, his dean. And so all these things together just, caused him to behave in ways that is very different from how we meet him at the beginning of the film.
Right. Leads him down a path.
Yes.
When you finished writing the screenplay, did you know instantly that you wanted to make it? Did you show it to other people? How did that work out?
So when I finished it, I was very proud of it. I thought I had something good. I really was. I laughed while I was writing it, and I was having a good time living the lives of these characters and trying to put obstacles in our lead character's way. And so that was really fun. And then I submitted it to a bunch of competition, screenplay competition and festivals, and it won a grand prize at a bunch of them, or a couple of them, and won, other smaller festivals. And so I got a lot of good press on it as far as the screenplay itself. You send it out to these different companies to give you coverage, and I was getting pretty positive responses from that. So that's just encouraged me to kind of keep going and driving and trying to, find the funding in order to, get it made. So it was something that I was really, really excited to see this movie get made. I wrote it also in a way, that was kind of low budget in mind. We don't have any big effects or special or explosions or crazy locations.
Car chases.
It was all very doable, and so there was always the possibility that we'd really low budget it, but unfortunately we didn't have to do that.
Right. To go back a little bit. So you said that you wrote it and submitted it to some competitions and for feedback. Can you explain a little bit about that for people that are writers that, maybe are just beginning to write and they're like, I have a screenplay. How do I know if it's any good?
Yeah, well, there's different companies. There's one called Blacklist. There's another Coverfly. Then there's one called Slated.com. And then you pay them, right? And they will read your screenplay and they will give you feedback on it, right? And sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's insulting how bad it is. But you want to get feedback, and it's some people get it, some people don't. More times than not, though, they'll tell you things that will help you improve the screenplay. So you have to be willing to take those notes and either accept them, reject them, or try to interpret what they were not getting from the content. Right. And then in the film festival world, you send it out to a festival. Some of those festivals, here's the submission fee, but you could pay a little extra and they will give you a written feedback on it. And that's also helpful as well. I will say that one of the best feedback that I got on a screenplay I got recently for a different screenplay was from the Sundance Film Festival. Right. Slamdance. Slamdance gave me some terrific notes, and that was probably one of the better ones. When I submitted to these other ones, it feels like it's coming from people that are frustrated screenwriters often, and they're not, so they're very when you read a screenplay that's not yours, I think people open it up. And before they start reading it, they assume it's not going to be good, right? So you have to kind of make sure it's really good at the very beginning. They're going to stay with it because they're going to assume it's bad, and because most screenplays are,
right. I've read a few myself. It's I promise everyone, listen, I'll read the first 5 pages, but that's all I'm promising.
Yeah, and the people that actually finance movies, most of the time they don't read.
They don't even read it. Yeah.
So you have to write a really good treatment, and then but it has to be based on a screenplay that exists, right? So that if the treatment sells them to get to the next level, then they'll read or someone in their company will read the screenplay.
Right. Speaking of finance, how did that all come together for you?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. So this is my second fictional feature, and my last one, I crowdfunded it mostly. That one was called A Feral World. It's a very different film. It's not a comedy. That one was a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age story, and so that one has a lot more despair. I'm still proud of it, and I like it, but it was a much different kind of film. But because I made that one and it got out into the world, I had, it's easier to promote yourself as a writer director if you have something that has been made and distributed. And so because that was out in the world, I was then trying to find financing for Publish or Perish. my friend and who ended up being our DP, Trevor Merchant, we did a proof of concept. So we had the inciting incident in the film. We shot that scene and another scene that we didn't use it really, but we had the main scene where the kid gets hit by the car. And then we had a poster. So we had the poster, we had, a well-written treatment, we had the screenplay. So we had all this stuff. And then I was introduced to my now partner, Jonathan Miller. And I met him because he was writing a screenplay for an idea that he wanted to develop. And it didn't really, I wanted to work with him, as a screenwriter, I was interested. But then he asked me, hey, do you have anything that you're working on? And so I showed him Publish or Perish. And a couple of days later, he's like, hey, has anybody optioned that yet? And then from there on in, he was very interested in, it was his first time producing. And so he's in a company called Parsonix, that's his company. He's the CEO of it. It's a very successful investment firm. And based on that, he's connected to people that he was able to raise the money to finance the feature, so that everybody working on it was able to get paid, and we were able to have the number of days that we actually needed to make the movie. So Jonathan is my partner in crime and our financial producer, and I was more of the creative producer on the project.
Right. What were some of the main obstacles that you had to overcome to get this to the screen?
Boy, aside from, finding, partnering up with Jonathan was like the biggest hurdle, right?
Finances usually, always.
and he was so like supportive and helpful, and he really wanted to make a good movie. So, that was really great. The other hurdles are always just, day to day, like when you make a film, it's all a hurdle, like I gotta get, the right locations. I have to get the right cast. And then, we have to, get all, figure out when and what sequence are we going to shoot this in, and where are we going to get the cars. And so all the logistics of the production design, all of it is like just massive. Right. And then when we finally get to day one of shooting, it was Omicron had just happened. Right. And so now we're all masked up, and day one of the shoot, our audio guy tested positive. And so we were delayed until we can find another audio guy at the last minute, because, we needed this location at that day. Unfortunately, we were able to find somebody, but so Omicron was one of the biggest ones that I would say.
COVID, definitely is a bit of an obstacle, definitely. When it comes to casting, what do you look for? Do you go for look first? Do you go for essence of character? How do you do?
I guess, we do go by look first, right? I mean, it's sad, but true, right? And it doesn't have to be, beauty is not necessarily the thing we're looking for.
Just the look of the character.
Yeah. Do they inhabit, do they look like sort of how I envisioned it? And sometimes I'm surprised, like, well, that's not exactly how I looked like, but that guy could do it, And so then you see the audition and you're like, oh, wow, this guy's good. Or he's not really right fit, So it's a combination of, do they look the role, and primarily, can they act well? Do they really, communicate that they understand the character?
When it comes down to, let's say, two actors are, really good, you like them, what would be like a deciding factor for you to like?
I guess what we did in our situation, like we were having an issue, not an issue, but we were trying to decide on who we wanted for the role of Allison, who plays Jim's wife. And we had several really good actors, and we couldn't really decide. So Jonathan and I, we had them come in again and read with Timothy McCracken, who's our lead actor. And so the chemistry, how do they play off one another? And the woman who we end up casting, her name is Anastasia Davidson. She had worked with Tim before, and she knew Tim. And so, in fact, in a play that they did called Anna Karenina, she was also his wife in that play. So the familiarity was already there. They had pretty good chemistry. And so it's often that, like, how do they play? And also what I'll do is in an audition, I'll give them a direction that may not be something that we're actually going to do, but like I'll give them a thing that is off the mark, right? And do they absorb it? Do they try it, or is it exactly the same? And trained, talented actors, they absorb it and they do it. And kind of new people don't really know how to adjust,
how to change. Yeah. How did you end up getting into film?
How did I get it? I mean, it's been a lifelong process, right? Because I mean, I've done it ever since I was a little kid. But I do remember one defining moment two actually, where I was a kid and I went to a summer camp and they were showing a movie of another kid who was just a little bit older than me, who had made an animated movie. He was using Stevie Wonder's Superstition. And so somebody comes down the stairs and all the furniture and the objects in the room were dancing to the song. And I was just flabbergasted that this kid could do that. And I've always been a movie buff, even from when I was a kid. So I went home and I used my dad's Super 8 camera and I started shooting and practicing with it. And then I got my own camera that had a Super 8, a single frame feature. So then I was doing my own animated films. And then I saw Star Wars, right? That's for all of us. But it was not just seeing Star Wars that just blew me away. I saw the making of Star Wars. And I do remember one thing in particular where the sound design crew was gathering audio, and they were in the desert, and there was like these high tension wires that hold up like the telephone poles. They're made of like a steel cable, and the guy had like a little mallet, and he was hitting the mallet hitting the cable with the mallet, and it was causing this pew sound. And that was the sound that they ended up using for the blasters.
Oh, right.
I was just like, wow, that is so cool. And so that opened my eyes to the whole process of making films and how manufactured it all is and how audiences are so manipulated and we don't think about all those elements. And that kind of between the kid doing the Superstition and Star Wars and the making of, I think that was kind of what got me hooked.
Cool. Do you have a shout out for anyone that helped you, when you were first starting out, anyone that was pivotal in getting you to where you are now?
Boy, there's been so many, I will say, my parents were very supportive of the arts. My mother was an artist. And so there was never like, you got to get a job in business. There was none of that. We went to the theater.
Awesome.
Yeah. We went to the theater all the time. We went to the movies all the time. We went to art museums. And so I was exposed to all that. So there was never like, oh, you shouldn't make movies because there's no money in it. There was none of that kind of talk. So that was like the starting point. But then, throughout my career, I had, when I went to graduate school, I had a terrific professor named Stuart McClellan, who was very instrumental in like getting me started in more in documentary and industrial style films. And then when I was teaching in University of Memphis, I had two mentors there, like David Appleby and Stephen Ross. Both of those guys were a big impact on me making movies. And in an academic environment, when you're making movies, you're often using far less resources than like a big Hollywood production.
Right.
So I learned how to kind of do it at a smaller level out of necessity. But I'd say those are the people that really, inspired me the most.
What is a piece of sage advice someone has given you that's really helped you through your career so far?
So the person who introduced me to Jonathan, his name is Kent Youngblood. He's a line producer here in Denver, and he's a very talented, good guy. I remember after I made Feral World, which I crowdfunded and made for very little money, I was like, I could always make Publish or Perish, with, bare minimum, and we'll just make it on the weekends. And I remember him saying to me, David, don't do that. You've already made that movie. Don't go there. Yeah. And so I really appreciated that, because it's like, you're right. I don't really want to do it all myself again. And so that was really good advice. And I appreciate him introducing me to Jonathan, and as well as, that piece of advice. That was really a good one.
How important has networking been to you and your career?
Very, so networking is one of those things that you just have to do. You have to be nice to people, and, don't burn bridges, and figure out so a lot of the people that worked on our crew were former students of mine. Our production designer, Kelly Spencer, was our was a former student, or my DP was a former student, Trevor Merchant, so so in Denver, I'm connected to the people, right? If I moved to Hollywood, I would have to start all again. I only know a few people there,
right?
But so it's really just, the people you work with, just, be in touch with them. Don't just call them up when you want something from them, just stay in touch with them.
Come to my movie premiere.
Yeah. Be nice to them all the time, not just when you need something. Yeah.
Exactly. How do you decide what to say yes to? Like, you are a writer, producer, director, so you sort of do your own projects, but have you worked on other things where they've come to you? Like, how do you decide?
Yes. So, I have to want to do it. Like I'm in a fortunate place than a lot of other filmmakers in that, I have a salary job at the University of Colorado. So I can say yes and no to things, and I can pick and choose the type of projects that interest me. So I've had people come to me with, even the one that I got the Emmy for, which is Mortal Lessons. That one, someone came to me and said, I have this great idea. And they had all this footage that they wanted somebody to edit. And I looked at the footage and I was like, this footage isn't really doing anything for me. But if I reshoot this, I have an idea on how to go forward with it, because I was hooked on the idea. And so based on that, I was able to kind of say yes to it. I'll say no to, like, if I don't think that if I'm not interested in it, if I don't see any either personal value, I won't learn anything. I won't, it's just some story that somebody else wants to tell, but doesn't mean anything to me, then I will probably say no, but it has to kind of touch me at some level.
Right. If there was someone wanting to, become a filmmaker, they're in high school or not in high school, what would your advice be? What would a tip be? How should they start out?
I would say watch a lot of movies, right? Not just YouTube, like watch a lot of movies and see how stories are told. What are the arcs of characters, and then make movies and, write movies. I remember I saw Spike Lee when I was starting out, and he's about my age, a little older, but I was always a big fan of Spike Lee. And I went to see him speak once, and he was talking about, you have to write down your ideas. If everybody has ideas, but if you don't write them down, they don't exist. And that was something that he had said. And so, you really have to write them down and collect them and work with them. So that would be the main things, is really become a student of cinema, look at it, think about it. How is the story being structured, and how is it being told? And what is it that makes you feel something, and do that. And then also keep writing and, write stories and, know your characters. So that would be where I would start. Yeah.
What is success to you?
Success for me, I've thought a lot about this one. My idea of success is getting paid for doing what you love. So it would be lovely to be wealthy, but it's not my driving force. I want to live a nice life, have a family, kids, dogs. But also I really want to be an artist. I really want to be a filmmaker. And so in order to do that, I need to, get paid. And if you get paid to do the thing you love, I feel very blessed and successful.
Right. What inspires you?
A lot of stuff inspires me. Like I play, I like video games. I would say that my last movie, A Feral World, I was very hooked on this game called Fallout. And so I loved that world. And so I would say there's some similarities in that. I really love movies by the Coen brothers. And so other filmmakers that I admire that really touch me in unusual ways, like movies and TV shows, books, all of it. It all kind of sifts into my brain and gives me ideas.
Right. Are there any opportunities that you've said no to that now in hindsight you wish you had have said yes to?
There's one juncture in my life that I always wonder about. So when I went to graduate school, this was I was in the late 90s, right? I was in graduate school at Brooklyn College, and I had an internship at HBO, and this was pre-Sopranos HBO. And, I was already in my 30s then. So, I was being an intern wasn't really, I had a job, right? And so now they were asking me to work for free, but I also had to finish my master's degree because I also wanted to work in academia. So I remember like, do I stay with this job as an unpaid intern, or do I finish my degree and then continue on my path to get my MFA in film and TV production? And I always wonder if I'd gone through that, if I had stayed at HBO, would I had a different career? I'm sure I would have a different career,
Right.
but I always wonder about that moment.
So do you think sometimes it is okay to do unpaid work or low paid work, or?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's required. I mean,
right.
I think you should be paid something, right? And if you're going to be an intern, that's because you have no experience, right? And then you want to get some experience. And if you are a valuable intern, they will pay you, or someone else will notice, and then you'll get a job because of it. So I think there is value to do that. We always tell our students at CU Denver, like, there's always people that want videos for free, right? So like my feeling is, never say yes to a free video if you have a certain skill, but you could do it for almost, $100, $200, depending on how easy it is.
Like sort of like pay for the cost of stuff.
Right, because otherwise it devalues making films, right? Like they make it, because we all have a cell phone with great video on it. They assume that, you're sitting around waiting to do something. So, if it costs them something, then at least there's some value to it. So, but I think starting out, I highly recommend working for little or no money sometimes,
just to develop that experience and
network
network. Right, we're back to networking. You were mentioning that today that Publish or Perish drops.
It came out on Amazon Prime today, so you can get it there. It's also on iTunes and Vudu if you're looking for it elsewhere, but we're really excited that it's on Amazon Prime right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how do we find you on the internet?
Me personally, you can find me at tinyfistfilms.com. And so that's where you can reach out to me. And then we also have publishorperish.movie if you want to find out the links where to see Publish or Perish.
Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we end for the day?
I would say that if you really like dark comedy, I'm very proud of Publish or Perish. I think it's it's a movie. That's the other thing I would tell young filmmakers, like make movies that you want to see. So that goes kind of back to your question, like when do you say yes or no? Like I would say, if you want to see this movie, then that's the movie that you want to make. And so this is that movie for me. I'm very proud of the movie, so I do encourage you all to go take a look at it. It is an independent film, so we need your eyeballs in order to definitely keep making movies.
It's a very, very funny movie. I actually have to share something that I did a short film, and I have a neighbor with a shovel in it as well. So when I watched your movie, I'm like, we're definitely. I'm like, okay.
Got to watch out for those people with shovels.
Yeah, definitely. It was very funny, especially with your movie when he goes into the hardware store to take it back.
Yes. He makes a lot of really dumb decisions. Yes.
Yes. Not the smartest.
He's really smart, but he's a terrible criminal.
Yeah, terrible criminal. He is smart, very smart. Yeah, just not a good criminal.
I always say like about that character that his name is Jim Bowden. The character is that everything he knows about crime he learned by watching CSI. That's
and yeah, that is a TV show, so it doesn't always relate to real life.
Correct.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time and sharing your story and all your advice about filmmaking. I really appreciate it. And let me know when, you have another movie coming out.
I will. I really appreciate you talking to me. Thank you, Sage.
Okay, thanks. And I will see you out and about, I'm sure, somewhere on a red carpet or some event sometime soon. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you.
Have a good day.